Hi there. For those of you who didn't get a chance to meet me, or more importantly, I didn't get a chance to meet you, my name is Hynie, and I'm from Ottawa, Canada. This is my promised experience report to Duncan from the recently completed Let's Test 2013 conference. Just to give anyone who might be watching this a bit of a sense of reference, I am somewhere in the middle of the Baltic right now, on a cruise ship, en route to Estonia. The wonderful thing about being a Canadian traveling in these parts is right now it's about 10 degrees and everyone's huddled up inside, and what you can see is Canadians everywhere on the deck desperately trying to get a tan because, well, they're on a cruise and the sun's out, so that's good enough for us. As long as there's beer and the sun, we'll do everything we can to try to get some sort of bragging rights when we get home. Maybe that's not a great thing about Canadians, but it's a thing about Canadians. I've now taught you this. So, let's test. First things first, Sweden. I've fallen madly in love with Sweden. It's a fantastic, wonderful country with just every person I met was from Sweden, and actually the Finns as well, and the Germans and the Brits. I mean, I've traveled a lot in Europe, but I really haven't had a chance to meet with members of my own community and my peers on a engaging social event like this. And I've been to conferences and workshops before, but this would be the first time I could ever think of that I was really feeling sad leaving this conference. Let's Test was everything I could hope it would be, but what I just didn't expect was that sense of belonging and that mutual learning and sharing that took place. I watched arguments, flat-out arguments, happen between extremely opinionated people, but you could see that clearly they were both listening to each other, and that notion that they were respecting each other's opinions and learning from the very things that they're saying to one another. I really sincerely hope that other conferences and workshops are paying attention and that they'll take a lesson from what's going on at this conference, because it's I'm still a little bit emotional about it, to be quite honest. It was really a fantastic event for me, and I suspect that I'm either going to be inspiring or incredibly annoying to everybody I work with once I get back to Ottawa. We'll see how it works out. Maybe I'll just hang out with Paul Holland a whole lot more than we do right now. Side note, Paul and I are both from Ottawa, and except for 12 years ago when he interviewed me and didn't hire me, Paul, we've actually never met in Ottawa. We only meet in other cities. So maybe we'll try to change that after this conference. We'll see. Maybe he'll let me beat him in set. So, as for the conference, beginning to end, incredibly well put together. Immediately greeted, you're just thrown right into the mix, and I'll just jump into maybe what I experienced from day to day. So, day one, I finally got to sit in a tutorial or a session or a talk with James Buck. And that in itself was something I was really looking forward to. I mean, I've read enough of what James has put down, but I've never actually had a chance to sit with him and listen to him as he actually presents his thoughts and engages in a room full of young minds from beginning to end. And what I found truly interesting was watching when he would key in on an individual and he would work with them, and he just wouldn't give up on them. A lot of times you'll actually see somebody will struggle a bit with something, and you can see that moment where that part of their mind, that self-control to sort of stick with the topic, and they've given up, and they're hoping that the person leading the session will just sort of move on to the other student. And James wouldn't do that. If James thought that this person actually had some ideas and had some thoughts, that he would stick with them and he would continue the discussion with them, and he would and he would figure out how can he reach this person, how can he bring him into the discussion, and how can the rest of the room learn something from this person, as well as this person, well, certainly in one example, this person finally realizing that in fact they did have something to contribute. Little side note, my introduction to James, he looked down at my tag, saw VDS4, which is my Twitter handle, and he stared at me straight in the eyes and said, VDS4. You sound familiar, but I don't remember you ever pissing me off. Michael Bolton was kicking around the corner and he told me that was probably the best compliment I could get from James, and so I nodded my head and shook his hand and walked away and figured that was a good start for the conference. Moving on to the first day of sessions. Actually, I'm gonna jump straight through to the last day of sessions now that I think about it. Biggest shock for me was Steve Smith's presentation. I mean, it immediately followed Karsten's, so I kind of see it all as one big presentation, but the way Steve built a living, literal human interface for receiving and transforming information and reacting to information, it's about 5 days since I went through that session right now, and I still don't know what to do with the information that Steve's put inside my head. I know I have to do something with it. And I'm going to be going to PSL in August, so I'm certain I'll come up with some ideas by then, but that was probably one of the most inspiring sessions I've ever sat through, and I can't even tell you why, other than I started to realize just how complex the human mind is in terms of communication, and how much I can't take it for granted when I'm trying to actually learn from people or teach people what I need to take into consideration at each and every moment, and how I just can't take I don't think I ever did take communication for granted, but I'm realizing now that I need to maybe spend a little bit more time educating myself on how the human mind works. That was a shocking session for me. Certainly one of my favorite moments was watching Maria perform her very first talk at a workshop, and we chatted a bit before, and to see somebody who was telling me, and sorry for outing you, Maria, that she was a bit nervous coming in, but she did a fantastic job. She just blew everybody away in the the session. She moved through, she personalized it, which was a teaching technique and a presentation technique that I never really saw. Every single slide that she had was effectively her. It was a representation of her and her reaction to the topic that she was discussing. The topic, by the way, was how to solve the puzzle for hiring. And she actually brought into the discussion some very interesting approaches on how to create a bit of a guide as to things to look for and where to begin. And so it's not just as open-ended as it might be. And when you go into, I suffer this way often. When I go into any kind of hiring process, the first thing that I do is throw out my plan, and I immediately interact with the person that I'm interviewing, and I draw a lot of new paths inside of that interview process. What I saw from Maria was an idea of how to actually, without scripting the entire interview, without having to follow a set path, how you can actually maintain some sort of integrity of what it is you're hoping to learn from the process, while as still interpreting the conversation and allowing the individual to bring forward their best parts and their worst parts and speak to you, and you can still learn a bit about the human being that's in front of you. that. Not too much sure anything else I want to add to this, but I may add a second part of this experience report after I take some notes. But for now, at least I've given you something. And I'm hoping, Duncan, that this maybe makes up for the fact that you lent me your shirt when my luggage was a full day late. You were the person who sized me up and said this may be snug, but Martin, you clearly need clothes because you're starting to smell. So for that, I thank you. And at this point, all I can say is I can't wait for Let's Test 2014, and I'll see if I can find a way to Ordev, because I want to find my way back to Sweden, and I want to find my way back into this community. Malmo, you have my attention right now, and I'll be seeing if there's ways for me to come out there as well. Thank you.